Thank you so much for watching Landumc Goes There. Please subscribe and hit the like button and the bell notification button. The Searchers is a 1956 Western film that was directed by John Ford and was based on a 1954 novel by Alan LeMay. It stars John Wayne as a middle-aged Civil War veteran who spends years looking for his abducted niece, played by Natalie Wood, accompanied by his adoptive nephew, played by Jeffrey Hunter. The movie was a commercial success, and since its release, it has now been considered a masterpiece and one of the greatest and most influential films ever made. While the film was primarily set in the plains of northwestern Texas, it was actually filmed in Monument Valley, Arizona. Some additional scenes were filmed in Mexican Hat, Utah, and in Bronson Canyon in Griffith Park in Los Angeles. The movie was shot in VistaVision with its widescreen process, and the director originally wanted to cast Fess Parker, whose performances as Davy Crockett on television had helped spark a national craze. He wanted him for the Jeffrey Hunter role, but Walt Disney, to whom Parker was under contract, refused to allow it and didn't tell Parker about the offer. Parker, looking back on this, said that this was one of the worst career-stifling moves that happened in his career. Several of the film critics have suggested that the movie was inspired by the 1836 kidnapping of 9-year-old Cynthia Ann Parker by Comanche warriors who raided her family's home in Fort Parker, Texas. She spent 24 years with the Comanches, married a war chief, and had 3 children, only to be rescued against her will by Texas Rangers. In this revered Western, Ethan Edwards, played by John Wayne, returns home to Texas after the Civil War. When members of his brother's family are killed or abducted by Comanches, he vows to track down his surviving relatives and bring them home. Eventually, Edwards gets the word that his niece, Debbie, played by Natalie Wood, is alive. And along with her adopted brother, Martin Pauly, played by Jeffrey Hunter, he embarks on a dangerous mission to find her, traveling deep into Comanche territory. Natalie Wood was still a student in high school when this film was being made, and on several occasions, John Wayne and Jeffrey Hunter had to pick her up from school. Can you imagine the thrill of this and the excitement that she experienced? Having these famous movie stars pick her up from school and see her classmates' reactions to this. Lana Wood went through a grueling audition process, and she was at one time ushered into the room where she was introduced to John Wayne and John Ford. Instead of rehearsing a scene from the script, the 2 performers were asked by Ford, as he immediately told Wayne to lift her up, please. Wayne grabbed her and stood up with her, and she felt like she extended all the way to the ceiling. The entire time, he never stopped smiling at her. Wayne said that it was fine and told Ford that he had no problem lifting her at all. Now, the director, Ford, was known for his terrible temper and his habit of playing cruel practical jokes on the cast and crew. But he was unusually kind to John Wayne's son, Patrick Wayne. It was thought that almost everybody had their day in the barrel, but he was spared from that, which he thought to be good and bad. It made him out to be one of the most unpopular people on the set because everybody was getting reamed but him. This was the only director that he had ever worked with at that point, and he figured that this was the way pictures were made. He felt like this was a pretty easy process because he had his real father on the set with him, and he didn't have to act scared during a scene because he really was. He was completely new to filmmaking, and thankfully John Ford was easy on him in his baptismal role. It's said that this film was Peter Fonda's inspiration for the movie Easy Rider in 1969. Fonda said the film would be about the Duke, John Wayne, and Jeffrey Hunter looking for Natalie Wood. Fonda would be the Duke, and Dennis Hopper would be his Ward Bond. America would be their Natalie Wood. The day-for-night filming of Ethan's speech recounting his discovery and burial of Lucy required more than one take, but this was only because Ward Bond needed a shave. John Wayne nailed the scene on the first take, but for some unknown reason at the time, the camera stopped. John Ford was extremely irritated, and he asked the operator of the camera what was wrong with it. As he turned to answer Ford, the power to the camera returned, and they were able to resume filming the scene without any more incidents. Come to find out, there was nothing wrong with the camera at all. Ward Bond had pulled the plug on the camera in order to plug in his electric razor. The crew never did tell Ford about it. Goodness gracious, it would have shut production down. And they really did think that he might physically harm Bond. Years later, after Bond's death, cameraman Winton C. Hoke told Ford about what really happened one time when they were at a Hollywood event. Reportedly, Ford's face turned white and he was speechless. Western star Harry Carey died in 1947. Director John Ford cast Carey's wife, Olive Carey, as Miss Jorgensen, the mother, and also Carey's son, Harry Carey Jr., as Brad, all of this being done as a tribute to Carey. In the closing scene, with John Wayne framed in the doorway, Wayne holds his right elbow with his left hand in a pose that Carey fans would recognize. It was one that he often used on the set. Wayne did this as a tribute to Carey, as his lovely wife Olive looked on off camera. It's said that while they were in the desert filming, John Ford was stung by a scorpion. Some of the financial backers were really concerned, and they worried about the health of the director, and they wondered what they were going to do if it caused him to die. John Wayne offered to check in on him to find out how the stricken director was doing. A few minutes later, he came out of Ford's trailer and told the investors that everything's okay. John is fine. It's the scorpion who died. Now, this next little fact is so odd that I don't know if it's really true, but I found it in the research that I'm doing for this film, and I thought I ought to tell you about it. It's reported that Buddy Holly and his friends saw this movie in a Texas theater in the summer of 1956, and that they were so impressed by John Wayne repeatedly using the phrase, "That'll be the day," that they went on to use that as a title for their now standard rock song, which they composed soon after this. Now, one of the things that stands out in this film is the claim that Lana Wood makes about her sister Natalie, and the fact that she says that she was assaulted by the famed actor Kirk Douglas while she was making this film. Her mother had scheduled a meeting with Douglas, hoping that this might open many doors for her in the acting world if she got a nod from this famous, handsome actor. It's said that when Natalie got back into the car, she looked completely disheveled and just entirely awful, and that she and her mother started whispering to each other. She and Natalie never discussed what happened to her that night until they were both adults, where at that time Natalie actually admitted to her sister that she was assaulted by this famous actor. She was completely terrified and confused by the entire process. Natalie and her mother had decided not to mention this to anyone, fearing that this would tarnish Natalie's Hollywood standing if she did go ahead and publicly accuse Douglas of what she said happened. Everybody that was involved in this is dead except for Lana, and she swears by this story. A lot of people describe this film as a Homeric odyssey, with John Wayne's performance being uncommonly commanding. and leaving The Searchers to be surely one of the best westerns ever made. Take a look back at this grand Ford film. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll continue to chase the classics.